Here we go again. Another shambolic crisis in the House of Commons. Yesterday, John Bercow, the Speaker of the House, said he would not allow Theresa May's twice failed deal to be voted on again, sparking what some called a constitutional crisis. This is crazy. This has been dragging on now for almost 3 years. It is almost 3 years since we voted to leave the European Union. And we want out. We want out. And there are two key reasons why we want out. One, we voted to leave. Our vote must be respected. And we now have the spectacle of politicians, members of both houses of Parliament, doing all they can to overturn, to frustrate, to ignore, to abandon the result of the Brexit referendum. For the very sake of democracy itself, we must leave the European Union. You can already hear people saying, I'm not going to vote again. That's what they want. They want complete control. They don't want the electorate interfering. This has done immense and enormous damage to democracy in this country. We must leave the European Union if we have any hope of repairing some of that damage. But there's another reason we must leave the European Union, and the sooner the better. And that reason is so that we can get on with talking about the other issues that affect this country. For more than 3 years, actually, because prior to the referendum, Brexit dominated political debate as well. For more than 3 years, it's been the only thing that big politics has been talking about. And meanwhile, the country continues to go down the drain. We still have mass immigration from all over the world. And in fact, even pro-Brexit parties are talking about essentially a greater immigration from outside Europe. They use a politically correct line of why should Europeans have greater access to immigration to Britain? Why not the Commonwealth? Why not countries from across the world? That's the opposite of what For Britain thinks. We don't want mass immigration from across the world. We don't want immigration from societies with which we have nothing in common. And 3/4 of immigration comes from outside the European Union. But for the last few years, you would think we'd had no control over any of this. When we leave the EU, we'll take back control of immigration. We've had control, and 3/4 of it was from outside the European Union. I want us to get back to talking about that. I want us to talk about mass immigration again. I want us to talk about white hate. I want us to talk about the education system in this country teaching British children to hate themselves, especially white British children. We still have the Islamization of our country occurring. We still have a 2 or even 3-tier justice system which punishes people for a tweet, while children are still being gang raped in the streets. Even in Rotherham, the most notorious place for this horrific gang rape of our children, it's worse than it was prior to the J report. This is all still going on. British veterans are still being prosecuted for things that happened years ago, or sleeping on the streets. Our free speech is completely non-existent. All of this has nothing to do with the European Union. All of this is caused by incompetence in the House of Commons. And now their continued incompetence on Brexit means that this could drag on for years and years. And we could have single-issue politicians and single-issue parties dominating, who have policies whose other policies are simply incidental. It will be all about Brexit. I don't want it to be all about Brexit. I voted to leave the EU so we could get back to being a country that governs itself. But that in itself is a job that we have to do. We have to do that governing we wanted to do when we were arguing to leave the European Union. And that means dealing with domestic issues, vital domestic issues, which are being ignored and have been ignored for years. So, what's the best way forward now? Janice Atkinson is once again doing the right thing. Janice Atkinson has written to Viktor Orban in Hungary, asking him and his country to veto any extension to Article 50. This is our best chance now of getting a clean break on the 29th of March. I implore our friends and colleagues across Europe to do all you can to stop any extension to Article 50. Therefore, the legal default is that we leave on the 29th of March, we break free, become the free nation we voted to become, and then we can get on with scrutinising the House of Commons, the real problem. We must clean up the House of Commons. We must get rid of those who not only have made a shambles of Brexit, but have allowed all of these other major issues to go unattended or worse, completely neglected, completely, no, they don't give a damn. They don't give a damn about what happens here in this country. We do. We want to focus on other issues. So let us get out on the 29th of March and do all you can to campaign, get behind MEPs who are pushing this, who are trying to get colleagues in Europe to stop any extension of Article 50. So we can get out, our vote will be honoured, and we can get on with solving the very many problems this country faces. We cannot focus on this single issue for years and years to come, because there are other things we need to deal with. And I've heard it said that there are some who would be happy for us to live in an Islamic state as long as it was outside the European Union. I'm not happy with being in the European Union. I'm not happy with being in an Islamic state. I'm not happy with being in a police state. I'm not happy with being in a country where children are taught self-hatred. I'm not happy being in a country where people who fought for it are treated as subhuman, left in the streets or prosecuted for things that happened years ago. All of this has to stop. But primarily, we must, if we're going to deal with any of these issues, we must stop mass immigration. And that has fallen off the agenda. We must get back to talking about these issues. Let's get out on the 29th of March. Let's get out and move on and build the new future that we want to build. We want a British future. We want a future of justice and sanity. Join us and help us build that future.